what's up? Look what I got. Look what I got. Check it out. Look what I got. Look what I got. Look what I got. Okay. If you have seen me perform on stage in the past 2 years, you may have noticed that I don't always, put that right there. You might notice that I don't always have a bass amp on stage. I don't hate bass amps. I think bass amps are awesome. However, I don't always have the opportunity to use the bass amp that I want to use on stage, and I got sick of it. So what I decided to do, to get a nice consistent sound, I decided to opt for the compact preamp DI. Specifically, this one is the Minnow by Trickfish. This one has the bullhead circuitry in it, the same as my 1K head that I use with my setup. And then I also decided to go with the Xvive U45 system. So this is 90% of what you will hear whenever you come to a show of mine, right? I absolutely love bass amps. I love having that sound on stage, but I'm not always afforded with the ability to travel with a bass amp, especially doing fly dates, being out of country and everything like that. I can't always expect to use a bass amp that I want to use, and I feel that this was the alternative that really saved my life. One, I'm able to have a nice consistent sound every single day. So no matter what venue it is, whether it's a jazz club, whether it's a festival, whether we're playing, a theater or anything of that, even if it's a bar, it doesn't matter because I have the ability to have a nice, consistent sound that sounds exactly the same every night. And the reason for that is because I'm plugging directly into this box and scoping my tone and then sending it directly to my ears. One point that I want to add that I think is really hard to argue is the fact that if you play in a very loud band, if there's instrumentation on stage that is loud, this setup is a great way to save your ears. You are in complete control of the volume at which your ears are receiving information. Nothing is more important for a musician than being able to hear and being able to hear for a long time. This is a great way to protect your hearing, especially for my musicians out there that have been doing this for a really long time. This is a great way to retain what hearing you have left. Now, do I think this is for everybody? No. Do I think it's better than having a bass amp on stage? Close to no, not exactly a no. I think that having a bass amp on stage has benefits. One of those benefits is that if you're working with a sound guy who actually likes to use the bass amp on stage as a way to project sound into the crowd, then yes, that is going to help, right? I don't want to take away from anything from the performance. Where I think it excels to have this kind of system is that if you're working with someone that has an acoustic instrument that requires them to be mic'd, this is a great way to minimize the amount of sound on stage so that that instrument can really shine. So if you're looking for a way to clean up your sound and not really sacrifice being able to hear yourself, this is a great way to go about that. There have been plenty of times where I've showed up to a venue and they had a bass amp and the sound guy wanted to have the bass amp project sound on stage for him to be able to mix in. And I will use this, and the bass amp on stage. Mostly because I like the consistency in my ear, and the bass amp is satisfying the needs of what the sound guy needs, and occasionally even bandmates. A lot of people like to have the bass amp on stage. For me, it's not necessarily a necessity. If I have a bass amp on stage, it's more like a cherry on top, being able to feel that extra air and everything. But 90% of the time, I will use a setup like this in order to be able to just have that consistency. How many times have I said consistency on this video? Do I think that you should get rid of your bass amp and go strictly with in-ears and a DI box? No. Do I think you should have it as an option? Absolutely. If it was the end of the world, would this be what I use?